I'm not a stage play type of person. I don't really like theater shows very much. No offense to anybody that likes theater. But if you're talking about plays, this is the one play I would see.
Maniac is hiding in here.
You've gone out of your mind. Go on. Kill her! Kill her!
As soon as it opens up, I'm like, that's something I would watch.
And what was the name of the play?
Starts with the hooker and immediately
Knife
got
to her
your
throat.
attention. And
Yeah.
yeah. The stage setup looks so sick. Yeah,
Amazing.
it starts out where it's like, you think you're
part of
they're
the movie.
establishing the world, and they do the flip on you.
Yeah.
Okay, now we know it's a stage play, and yeah, it would be a kick-ass stage
Wonderful
play.
design. Once they started breaking out into dancing, though, I was kind of like, okay, now I'm out again.
Yeah.
But
Well, that's very, that gets us into that kind of, Euro like slasher mode,
oh yeah.
and
It sets the
even
tone.
the killer's doing a little spin.
Oh, he's twirling like he's he's loving it. Yeah, it's awesome.
Well, the killer gets down into his like leotards or something there at the right before they switch the reality on us. Mm-hmm. And but yeah, no, I love the look of that whole thing as it starts up.
It's fantastic. It really is, and it sets the mood for the movie. Like it's like okay, and then they turn the lights on, and director's calling cut. The director's a real director in this one.
Yeah, Brandon, David Brandon.
Yeah,
Is that
Irish.
his name?
yes. He's
Yeah.
fantastic in this movie.
He's great in it.
There's a great little story about how he met the director on Caligula 2.
You will bear witness to the history I shall create. And in your mind, you will compose verses.
They were both acting, and I believe he cuts his tongue out in one scene, which is pretty awesome. But yeah, this movie is kind of like a bunch of friends getting together and pulling it off. And so a lot of people get called back that worked with McKelly Suave in the past. Even though it's his first movie, he had been an assistant director on a lot of cool projects for
and
Dario
an actor
Argento.
in several of them,
Mm-hmm.
and in this one too. Yeah, but a lot of familiar names. We've got Giovanni Rossini, who plays Brett in the movie, who is the guy who gets the drill through the head in City of the Living Dead. Joe D'Amato is the producer here. And then we can get in. Yeah.
Barbara Capisti, she's in the church.
Yeah.
She's also in the New York Ripper.
Nice, yeah.
We should probably put a disclaimer that we're gonna butcher every Italian name.
Oh yeah, we're not.
And
Italian.
they kind of helped us out a little bit because there's a lot of names that have been changed in the credits to more Americans.
Yes.
I'll give you an
Thank
example.
God.
The writer George Eastman, who also plays the killer.
Oh, I didn't know that.
He's in the killer suit when the mask is on. Is also the killer in Absurd, and is also the killer in Atheropophagus. And D'Amato directed both of those films too. So George Eastman was like this actor who was in a lot of spaghetti westerns, and he was 6'9", so he was kind of like this huge hulking presence that these guys love to use.
He
in,
was
villainous
6'9".
roles. Yes.
Well, I guess I couldn't tell because he had a giant owl head.
Well,
on
you
his
had
head.
a different person playing without the owl mask.
Oh, okay.
But with the owl mask
especially
on,
when
he
it
did
was
play the killer.
Especially when it was dancing.
Yeah.
They had a dancer.
Yeah.
And then sometimes even the director would put the helmet on.
That's
yeah,
so cool.
which is very,
well, you could tell there was a camaraderie on this one. Like you were talking about, the collaboration, familiar faces, everybody knowing each other.
The dialogue writer, Sheila, I think her name's Goldberg. Again, that could be a fake name too, but she plays the nurse in this movie, kind of the mean nurse when they go into the
the psychiatrist.
I've got something. I've got something else about that too. But she kind of plays the mean
Yeah.
nurse. But she wrote the screenplay to Body Count, which was the Diodato Italian slasher film, which might be my favorite Italian 80s American slasher kind of rip-off film.
Tracy?
Tony!
Hang on, I've almost got it.
What?
And
You know?
Diodato
Yeah.
directed the infamous Cannibal Holocaust.
Exactly, yeah. But speaking of that doctor's office, I don't know if you guys noticed this, but if not, we have to play a clip of this.
Well,
Did you guys notice the way the doctor was examining that actress's leg when she comes in to get with
In
the
what
sprained
way?
ankle? He is
ahead.
doing an amazing job of just kind of like rubbing her down
Yes,
during
with a
that
lotion or
dialogue
something.
scene. It's amazing. Like
Yeah.
it goes on for a good 40
that,
seconds.
That doctor totally just threw his license away when with discretion.
Either
'Cause
that
he's
or
like, let me talk about the mental
either that or
patient.
that is the Italian medical
Yeah.
system that
We're
we're
open.
missing out on
Yeah,
here.
we're open here.
Great bedside manner.
Yeah, but
Maybe a little too much.
they needed a bed.
Oh
yeah.
no! He's like, oh, you got broken arms, sweetie? Let me kiss it. Let me kiss it for you.
Yeah.
Spray a
the
little
fuck away
Windex
from
and
me.
kiss it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
It's like a Greek.
the first horror film for this director, who I'm a big fan of, who also directed Cemetery Man, which I'm a huge fan of, and
Yeah.
The Church. You know, and I wonder whether his acting background, I'm sure it played a huge role in the way that he works.
Mm-hmm.
And
Well, his assistant directing and actual directing with the music video for Demons 2 and a music video for Phenomena, which is the Dario Argento monkey chimp movie.
yeah.
Bug movie, which is awesome in its own right. Got the attention of Joe D'Amato and seeing that he was capable of taking a small, little story and running with it and
Yeah.
being really capable. And he, as a director, was like fascinated by, cinema and Hitchcock. Especially, he read the Hitchcock Truffaut book, which you all read in, film school, and would employ these little things that I think Joe saw and really gave him a leg up to do his first movie, and got the financing and was like, yeah, I'll be there, and was on set. He's a real hands-on dude.
Yeah, yeah.
And but kind of hands off, but like behind his shoulder and kind of helping him out along the way when he needed it. And I know even they were behind schedule by it was a 5-week movie. It was supposed to be 4 weeks, but the cinematographer they initially got was a little bit slow and kind of a perfectionist. And Joe ended up doing the last week, doing the cinematography on the
wow.
movie for the last 5th week, and was just like, he wasn't any better than the other cinematographer, but he was, his style was that apparently he could light the same way, but with one light well placed, was how McKelly said it.
That makes sense, yeah. 'Cause
But that made it through and pushed the
Yeah.
production through the finish line, which is really fucking cool. That the producer steps up and
yeah,
does that.
and this director also, his first directorial debut was for the documentary on Argento.
Oh, good doc.
Argento's World of Horror. Which,
It's a weird doc.
It
It's
is a
good.
weird doc. I watched it when I was a kid. It's what really kind of started me
It'll
off
make you
on
fall
Argento.
in love with Argento.
It
really
really
does.
did. For however you direct a doc, it is a great doc.
Yeah.
And kind of started him off there. Yeah.
Yeah,
So-
Argento's such a soft-spoken, like frail, and he's almost like
Yeah.
he's almost like Edward Scissorhands or like a Tim Burton character, and
He is.
and that doc really lets him be flowery and kind of just talk about his sadness and what brings him to direct. And he's it's the day before they're gonna shoot Phenomena, or it's throughout his a lot of movies that they worked on together. Him as an AD, McKelly as an AD. But the best one, I'll play a clip, is him sitting on the truck essentially waiting, and they've lit it and everything. But he's we're about to drive to Austria or wherever they shot the opening of Phenomena, and he's
Yeah.
just depressed.
Io sono qua perché domani dovrebbe iniziare il mio film, cioè domani inizia il mio film a Zurigo. Allora i camion si stanno caricando. 450 effetti speciali per il mio film Fenomeno. Io mi sento, non so, potrei sentirmi allegro, invece mi sento molto triste. Penso, ma ce la farò a farlo questo film.
He's just so depressed. He's trying to like put on airs for the camera, and McKelly's helping him dance it up, dress it up.
I feel like that's a common thing when you're shooting any filmmaker making a movie, because like even like there's that famous clip of like David Lynch, the black and white thing, where he's just like, I'm so depressed.
Yeah.
I don't know what the fuck I'm doing.
Yeah.
You're just like,
Especially
we've been
day
there.
one.
We've all been there.
Yeah, like I have a thing where I have to get, even if it's shit, I have to like roll the cameras. I have to get something in the can.
You gotta get that day one out.
Once
out
I
of your
get
system.
something in the can, it's like the biggest relief.
Yeah.
Even if it sucks, I know we'll never
No,
use
I
it.
agree. Yeah.
I mean, for any like wannabe filmmakers or filmmakers who are just getting started out there, just remember that however you feel at the end of day one, it's gonna change. Like the end of day one is when you always decide that you made the wrong decision to become a filmmaker.
Imposter
and what are you
syndrome
gonna do
set in.
next?
Oh God, yeah.
That always happens. And it will get better.
Yeah,
so
it's
you
common.
got to get
Totally.
that day one out of your system.
And every famous filmmaker will tell you the same thing.
Every single one.
All of
Yeah,
them.
Spielberg says like the hardest day on set is or the hardest thing about filmmaking is getting out of the car.
Yeah.
To do the shit.
And I like what Carpenter said. He was like, if you don't feel physically sick day one, then you're not a good filmmaker. And I was like, that's totally true. Like, not like you're vomiting,
Yeah.
but like you feel uneasy a little bit until you get there and usually relax.
It's an enormous amount of pressure.
Yeah, because like you're thinking of anything that can go wrong in your head. You're like, someone doesn't show up, someone's late,
But so
Light doesn't
Suave,
work,
this director probably had the best kind of initiation that you could have coming into Stage Fright, working with these guys like Argento, Fulci, Bava.
It's like a reunion.
I mean, he had just been in this family for so long. I'm sure I'd imagine it felt very collaborative, and he probably felt very supported, I would think.
And he had that actor background, so he could connect to the actors,
Yes.
tell them what he needed.
Right.
Yes.
He had a line of communication that a lot of first-time directors like have to establish on set. So like the fact that they were behind, I truly believe it's just as McKelly said, that it was a cinematography issue, that it was just kind of really hard to like get past the perfectionism of the initial cinematographer.
Right.
But I love what Suave like brings to the table, not just in a kills perspective, because it's easy to just look at the kills of this movie and see how it excels amongst its peers.
Yeah, I definitely want to talk about that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we could do a whole podcast just on the kills.
Yeah.
And I plan on talking about those. But the filmmaking aspects that he brings to the table are really awesome. And like going back to that Hitchcock Truffaut thing, like, did you know that the key in the third act is a 10x scale model of a key, so that he could use it in the close-up?
So
because
cool.
he understood, because Hitchcock said in that Truffaut book, the biggest thing in the image of what you're capturing, the largest thing is the most important. So like for your close-ups, like that's why you reserve your close-ups for when there's something important, because it's a telling to the audience like this is important, like this is the most important thing. And so the key is like what's keeping them trapped. This whole key situation. They lose the first one in the mud, and the second one's hidden by someone who ends up dying, and then they have no access to wherever that key's hidden. So they're locked in this place. And it's a great conceit and great plot device. But this key still becomes the focal point. And there's two enlarged keys. There's one that's like 10x size for this insert shot that's incredible.
Oh, yeah.
Of a very tense sequence of her under the stage trying to get this key. And then there's another shot of her running with the key, almost getting to the door, and it's a 3x size key, and it's just so the camera can pick up light hitting on it as she's running, because you lose all the details on the
you
prop
wouldn't even
that
see
small.
it if it was a you wouldn't
and so
see
it's
it.
just this, and then you can tell they carved it out of cardboard.
It's so cool. It's so cool.
But your mind is with the movie.
Yeah.
You're not
Yeah.
pressing pause to look at it.
Yeah.
And so it totally works. But that kind of filmmaking is like, you don't get that on your first movie. And that's what makes this director special, I think. So like the fact that he was a student of film and really like showed that he was listening when he was doing all his studies. And the way he talks about his time with Argento and Fulci and people and like working on these movies is he was a student And he really has this student mindset. He was paying attention. He wasn't just making the call sheets for tomorrow. He was like, like memorizing stuff and watching how everything was lit. And
if you're an AD, you really get to see every single department
there.
And that is
especially in Italian cinema.
Yes,
it's a totally different job over there too.
You're like in the film world and you're trying to like learn more about stuff, like other than being a PA or something like that, like trying to work in the AD department, I think is a smart move because you really get a sense of everybody's role. You know, even if you didn't know what it was before. Like I would just recommend it, and it seems like it worked out for him, where he's like, okay, I know everyone's job, I know what everybody's capable of. Yeah. Let's get this reunion going, and make it a great movie.
He did the exact thing you're supposed to do when you're making a film, and you have the feeling like I might not get another chance, and that's where the kills come in, and him throwing in the kitchen sink and being like, I'm going to do every single one.
Yeah. I was going to say.
Every single murder weapon.
Yeah. If you looked at my notes, at the top of the notes, it's like, talk about the kills. Because it's just like, every kill is so well thought out and executed. Like, it's so great. Like, I can't even pick my favorite one. I will say this. I think that is one of the best decapitations I've ever seen as far as the editing goes. The way they edit it, and it's a profile, so it goes right off. Yeah, I'm sure they probably shot that like 17 times, but man, I'm glad they took the time to make it work, because that is a great
with his own axe.
It's so cool. So cool. Yeah. And then I have to go with if I had to go with my favorite, when she's getting pulled under the floorboard and she comes off as a torso.
That's such a great surprise.
So cool. Did not expect that. Yeah. Totally ridiculous. Yes, but it doesn't matter because it's so fucking cool.
They go big.
Yeah, dude. You know. The drill
is super because you don't see that one coming. You never see them coming.
No.
And because he's switching it up, you know, becoming a driller killer like that after 2 knife kills. And before the knife kill is a pickaxe.
Pickaxe down the throat.
The pickaxe looks like it was straight from a prospector. Like, you know what I mean? But it's so
Valentine.
cool. It's so cool. And then leading up to that, though, the leading into him grabbing the axe is, there's a shot in this that I fucking love. And it's so simple. But when that rain's pouring down and she's in the car and you just see him just cross frame, like in that wide, it's so cool. Like, it's so, I mean, people are like, what are you talking about? If you look at that clip, though, you know what I'm talking about. It comes out of nowhere.
And it's always like a slinky going downstairs. There's always like several things that happen before the kill that like lead you on this filmmaking, like ratcheting, like the cat landing on her lap and her getting out and immediately getting...
Oh, that cat, Lucifer.
Yeah,
he's like, he's such a big part of this film, actually.
Well, at the very beginning, the director's like, you fucking little... You know? He's like grabbing it,
This is one of those movies where 90% of it takes place in one location that actually works.
Totally.
Like, they build out that world of the theater so well.
It was DeSantis rundown De Laurentiis. Not DeSantis, De Laurentiis.
Yeah, it's a whole other subject.
It's like a leftover studio he just kind of abandoned out in the middle of, outside of Rome, in the middle of these green fields.
So cool.
Yeah. Well, it's you really...
No air conditioning.
Yeah, they establish it well. Like in 10, 15 minutes, you feel like you know the world. Yeah. And it gives you enough variety there as they're moving through the dressing room.
Yeah, the geography is so well done.
Yeah, it is.
And that's so hard to do as a new director, blocking and geography. And like, he did have these smart benefits of, well, this is the stage, and this is backstage, and this is foreground, and all this stuff. He had that to his advantage. This is above. This,
From the very beginning, you get like a tour of the place. You do. And not only that, in those sequences, he gives you every character, which are pretty fleshed out, I would say. Like, everyone has a role.
You know who everybody is.
You know, totally. You know who everybody is right away. And some have some layers to them, like, you know, like in the beginning of the movie, you hate the director, like, immediately. But then, like, halfway through, as you're supposed to. Yeah. Then halfway through, there is some sympathy there. There is like
he's still human making mistakes.
There's a regret in his world, you know, and
because he's really the catalyst that gets them locked in with the killer.
Right. Yeah. You know? He's like, we got to keep going. You know.
Yeah, and not only that, but we got to exploit the deaths of our own.
Which is a great part of the story, by the way.
That sleazy businessman. You know, he's getting his money. It's on fire. And he's like, oh no.
Yeah. And he's just ready to pay everybody off. Great. And he's got a look to him that's like Hollywood.
He's dressed like a fat cat. Yeah, for sure.
But the one thing I really like which really sets this movie apart for me, is its unexpected, genre-defying, or its ability to break molds and break tradition with, like, you know, the group stays together. They don't splinter off like every other horror movie. You know, they have logic behind all their moves. They just keep getting picked off because this guy's a psycho killer. And they end up weeding themselves out on accident. Like, it's actually just the geography of the place that keeps cutting them off, and it's a hard place to navigate.
Right.
You know, they go up in the rafters, and it just makes it like a Super Mario platformer. They have to figure out how to survive against this guy who's just fucking a psycho killer.
Right.
And it's really scary because this guy's mentally unhinged.
Right.
You know, and I feel like he's really, as a first-time filmmaker, he's either lucking out, you know, but it shows in his later movies, I think, that he knew what he was always doing.
In fact, I would think, you know, in my opinion, for me as a fan, between him, Argento, Fulci, Bava, his films are the most easily digestible in regards to the way they play out. Like, he takes all those elements of Argento and Bava and the gore of Fulci, but yet the stories have sort of an arc that you can see where you're going.
Yeah.
Which I love, the sort of otherworldly quality to Argento, but
sometimes you want a story.
These are real stories that that even if you're not an Italian horror fan, you're not going to be one of these people who watches the film and you're like, what's going on here?
Right.
Like, it's actually stories that seem to work.
Pretty
for everybody.
straightforward.
I love the oddness and weirdness of Argento movies where they like twist and turn and go all these different places. Michele Soavi's movie is just like,
yes.
You know,
except for one point, and this is a compliment, is he always seems to end most of his movies in some type of weird dreamlike climax.
Yeah, they're still artistic. They still have that art. And I'm glad you brought that up because the art in this movie, specifically the staging of the final act where the owl man takes his throne and just sits there and
waiting
and just like waits out the final girl, and it's just like it's still a set behind him, right? And those feathers blowing in the fans are like make it like a winter scene.
I love that.
And that's how they would have done a winter scene, turn of the century. And like you have the setting up of all the dead and like propped up and like halfway, women like cut up and stuff. And it's this debauchery scene. Reminds me of this one movie, Devil Times 5, or what's that movie called?
Devil Times 5.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Oh my gosh, spoiler for Devil Times 5, but they end up in a toy like scenario where they're playing with all their dead, kills, which is all the adults, or kids are playing with the adults dead. But you have this display, and it's just like, you have to come through me to get out of here. Essentially. Right. It's this taunting, psycho
confidence
that is really actually terrifying, but artistically displayed.
Yes.
It's like he's not just any psycho killer.
Right.
He's got this like weirdness, quirkiness.
And the owl mask is a great choice.
Yes.
Great touch.
It's something on paper you might not fall in love with. But
owls
when you
are
see
terrifying.
Well, it's an intelligent predator.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And
they're really scary in real life.
They are scary.
It's just
they're
very
scary. And the mask is well designed.
Like they're great hunters.
You turn their heads around.
Yeah.
Some wild exorcist
and they
shit.
hunt at night, so it's like it's just terrifying. Yeah. That sequence though, jumping off the under the floorboards scene, which is going to the key, is one of the best horror scenes I've ever seen in my life. It's so good.
Yeah.
And
singular motivation.
Yes.
Just to stay alive, but also to get this key to stay alive.
And when it's jammed in the floorboard, she's trying to get it.
Masterfully shot, masterfully boarded.
And the lighting too, like the shafts of light are so cool.
Yeah.
And again, going back to the killer though, like I love when movies don't have an explanation of why they do things sometimes, and this is one of those cases where you don't know why he's killing people. He just is.
He's just mental.
And I think
that's enough.
That's enough. Because I think if we had like a backstory about, it's like he was attacked by an owl when he was a young boy, no one needs that.
Yeah.
Like
it's almost like Michael in that.
The mystery, more mystery, the better.
Yeah, it was Michael. I feel like, or Halloween was better when it was more mysterious. I feel like, and less about like the sister's storyline and stuff.
Totally.
But kind of the psychoness is what like. You don't know what to expect from this guy because he's so mental.
Yeah.
And then they end up doing a little Michael stuff in the end, which is kind of tongue in cheek.
Yeah.
But that aside, the whole, and it's still a fun sequence, like with the caretaker.
Just like I said. Right between the eyes. You see that, Ali? Right between the eyes.
Right between the eyes. Right between the eyes.
Oh my god!
What the
I
fuck?
thought that same thing.
Yeah, right between the eyes.
That takes. I shot him 6 times.
Yeah.
It goes way beyond that, where that line is stuck in your head.
If you look, because I was curious, I was like, am I missing something? Did I miss something in the beginning where he said something? Is he kooky? Like, I don't know. So I looked it up. If you look at the synopsis on Wikipedia, the very end it goes, the caretaker goes into shock after shooting him. And I was like, yeah, but that's like not like we don't get a sense of him going into shock. We're just like, oh yeah, he nailed him,
Yeah, it's like what's your version of shock? Because it's played almost comedically.
Yeah. But again, that goes back to your dreamlike thing. It's almost like it feels like it's the dream's ending.
Yeah.
The last 10 minutes of this movie, it just sort of gets a little more kind of like a little warped.
Yeah.
And but that seems to be his MO.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, and it's like, I can easily see someone like discounting the ending, being like, well, it kind of drops off. But I think it's like a vibe that he's just like converting the movie into. He's like, it might be a hard one, hard sell for some people, but I think it's like entertaining in a different way.
In a way, in his films, because I think about this about Cemetery Man too, it's almost like the horrors of what happens in the story eventually twists reality to the point to where something has to give. It's almost like not just a character going into shock, but the world goes into shock as this evil has happened, you know? And so you have to end on this weird swirling reality of...
Whereas most movies just cut it off before that, and the movie's over on the climax or whatever.
Yeah, it kind of lingers.
I kind of like that lingering, like, let's kind of look at this just for a minute, not like dwell on it, but let's like look at the world now they're forced to live in, the survivors.
Right.
You know what, I mean, this is totally off to me, or to some people, but the ending kind of reminded me of the ending of Twin Peaks: The Return, like where it just kind of lingers for a second before it finally cuts to black. And I thought that was really effective in this one. Again, like going back to the dreamlike thing, it does feel like it's the end of a dream.
Changed.
It's like, oh, okay, you're about to wake up now. It's all good, but
it's a really interesting way.
I had to ask about that, the whole right between the eyes thing, because I was like, am I missing something? Am I
it's
going
like all
crazy?
movies are like a series of like crossroads, good ones anyway, where they're making big decisions and like big things are happening. And like sometimes, a lot of the times, they just end on a crossroads. Where they're just like, well, I guess I'll go home, or I guess I'll do this. But it's like, it's really interesting to see like what a little bit of that road looks like sometimes.
Right.
Just go down it.
Some movies actually end on a crossroad.
Sure.
Cut to Castaway.
Sure.
Yeah. And this movie is part... When you talk about 80s slashers, and of course this is slightly later in the 80s, but this is a movie that, although celebrated, does not get brought up a lot in conversations regarding 80s slashers, and it really is as good or better than many of the 80s slashers that we all love. The kills are great. We've talked about the art. The performances are great.
I mean, if you
the
want to call
Mask is great. This is a movie that could have easily had a sequel with that kind of iconic killer look and everything. So it definitely something that deserves to be put up there with.
I love
any
the
of those
title,
80s
Stage Fright, such a great title.
It was a cool title.
So cool.
And it had like, it was Delirium before that, and Aquarius before.
Aquarius,
it had some weird titles.
And
like,
there are other movies called
it,
Stage Fright. So apparently, like the two words are put together to form one word. Like whenever you have to Google it, when you put stage and fright together is when you get it.
Yeah.
And because there are a couple of other stage frights. But.
I think that's why it took me so long to finally see the movie, because I couldn't figure out what the fuck it was actually called. Until later.
Exactly. Yeah.
But to bounce off what you were saying about it being just like great 80s, you can't call it a slasher. You can't call it a splatter movie. You can't call it a giallo. It's kind of this bastard child where it has its cake and eats it too for the best way, in the best way. So it's kind of this thing that's amoeba type changing face thing, faceless thing. It's funny, it has a faceless killer in the owl mask. Mostly, you see him at the end.
Yeah.
But faceless killer doing all these kind of like mixing of genres, like it's got kind of like a faceless genre.
Definitely.
And I think the one thing that gives it style, besides its cinematography and art and all that, the one thing that it has like really solid is the soundtrack. Mm-hmm. And Simon Boswell, Simon Boswell, who's from London, was getting a reputation in Rome as like a cheap go-to. Like he could make you like 5 songs for £1,000 or whatever, you know, and like you had to like I think he worked off a VHS of this movie. Like they sent him a VHS, you know.
That's awesome.
And he fucking you know, orchestrated the whole thing, and it's generally just him because the budget's so low. It's just him rocking a guitar and drums and everything. And he used, which is hilarious to me, he used a very famous drum beat that's like, I'm not 100%, but I'm pretty sure it's in...
Straight out of Compton, crazy motherfucker named Ice Cube, from the gang called Niggas with Attitudes.
The most sampled one, and he sampled it too, and he's like, I'm probably gonna get sued, like telling you guys I did this. But it's so iconic and so obvious when you hear it.
That fits in. I mean,
it does.
He may have very well taken it from that.
Totally.
Yeah.
You know, the Italians and the Americans were just kind of like swapping ideas for the last couple of decades of film, where, you know, and at this point, it really feels like, to your point, that we're getting we're getting giallo here. We're getting those sort of awesome visuals of Italian cinema, but then they're taking what they've learned from watching Friday the 13th and Halloween and everything, and mixing that in.
East meets West, West meets East, and it just backs and back and forth.
And at this point, I'm sure even within the music, there was a mixture of cultures there.
Yeah, it was just like what was happening with Kurosawa and George Lucas.
Yes.
Like they were just like bouncing ideas and then became like collaborators from afar.
Yes.
And this whole Simon Boswell thing is hilarious because, you know, he's so Michele is so connected with Argento and stuff. He could have easily got Goblin, you know, could have easily like walked into that stuff. But apparently Goblin was kind of, you know, they were always kind of like kind of infighting in the band and like almost breaking up all the time and not original members and all this stuff. And so I think it was Argento actually on Phenomena who brought in Simon Boswell to like, hey, like we need some more songs because I don't think Goblin's gonna be able to do this whole thing. And so that kind of started that collab, and then he became known as this kind of like cheap go-to for a song or two. But he was really fucking talented and like was able to do it for cheap, which is economical, and got him more work. And then Joe D'Amato took notice, and then everybody took notice. Jodorowsky, everybody took notice of this guy, and he started working his ass off in Rome and doing all these movies, like crazy movies. And then he ends up doing, which is hilarious, I think it's the craziest career move, but at the same time makes total sense. He ends up doing 2 albums with 2 different popes.
Whoa.
So, and like, it's great because Richard Stanley is his friend, and he describes it as like making total sense because the church, the Vatican, is like the same. They're selling the same thing, and they're just on the other side of the coin as horror movies. So it's like all this Satanism, you're writing music for satanic movies, the church and everything, and then you come around and you write music and work with the Pope. It's like y'all are both selling death and charging admission for it.
That's awesome.
You know, it's like fucking great. And so like the Pope is singing on tracks that Simon Boswell is laying down and shit.
I didn't know the Pope had albums, but I'm not surprised.
Yeah, it's Pope Benedict II.
They rock.
Yeah. Yeah, I can imagine those probably rip. But this fucking album, dude, rips. I mean, the movie rips.
Yeah. The soundtrack is fantastic.
It becomes an action movie at times.
Yeah.
You know, it becomes a typical giallo, like scary scene with the suspense thriller music. And then it's got, you know, tiny bits of like drama in there. Then they switch songs, And the way he described it was working with Italians at that time in Giallo and the low budgets was what he respected about it too was, most people probably wouldn't at the time, was the way they would switch between songs is like a knee jerk. They wouldn't like fade out, crossfade, do all these different motifs to like transition. They would just kick the jukebox and then the fucking song would change and that would kickstart the next scene.
Yeah.
And if you think about it, that's really helping the pacing of this movie.
Totally.
Is when like bam, it's like the next scene's happening and you're in it and then bam, a fucking drill comes through the wall and then bam.
No, totally. And
Fucking Italian as hell.
Yeah.
And it rules. And I love that this London guy like didn't get annoyed by that, but actually respected it as like this punk rock way of using his music.
Yeah.
Well, he
And
sets
he's
the
just like,
tone. He
"That
sets the
fucking
tone in
rules."
each scene, with his music.
it's so cool.
Yeah, it's so fantastic. And it's definitely a benefit that they got someone like that who might be more well versed in something more like rock and roll as opposed to just being electronic, which was a lot of Italian filmmakers were doing at the time.
But in that time, like he'd done Demons 2, which is a rock and roll soundtrack.
Very. Yeah.
And like all those had that kind of energy to them, and that's why it gets lumped together in these. Even though it's an American speaking, it's ADR'd as hell, but American, image of America, and trying to like we didn't make it in Italy, kind of like
They never say where they
facade.
are though. I don't think.
Yeah, it's intentional,
which is
you
good.
know? And it's cast. It's a worldly cast, mostly Italian, but like it is trying to be American so hard that they just get this white guy from the UK who's not American either, and it's just a bunch of foreign people making an American slasher splatter, horror movie.
And the films that do that, so many times that adds to that kind of eerie, otherworldly quality to the location, to the scenario, so.
The sad thing is when it came out, like, they spent all the money, they didn't have marketing or anything, so, like, part of McKelly's job, apparently, as an AD, was going and seeing how box office was, and then reporting back to the director of his other movies. And he's used to big movie premieres and stuff. And he goes to his own, he goes to a random theater and he asks the fucking theater owner, he's like, how's it doing? And he's like, you're a fucking idiot. And he's just like, what? He's like, go see for yourself. And he's just like has no idea what to expect being called an idiot. And he goes in and there's one guy in the movie theater and he's just sitting there and he's just like, fuck. And fucking nobody saw his movie. But like over time, you start to see, the Italian horrors, especially the giallos, getting a lot of praise.
Oh yeah. But yeah, like a lot like it's weird because this movie is Italian horror. It doesn't, and going back to like the kind of Americanized stuff, kind of trading back and forth, doesn't feel like a straight up Italian horror movie. I mean that as a
other than the ADR, yeah,
that's
a dead giveaway.
Yeah, there's like I would say there's like what like there's 10 characters overall that have speaking, and I would say half of them are fully ADR'd.
The cinematography is Western influence.
Totally,
it's definitely
going back to that floorboard thing, like that, like that definitely feels like an American shot. That
might be the biggest change for me from, some of the cinematography versus the cinematography in something like Opera or Phenomenon or something like that. It feels very Western, like you say. It feels very
not experimental.
Yeah,
no, it feels like an 80s slasher,
perfected.
like the cinematography, which really pushes it further into that world.
And even the kills feel like you said, the Friday 13th comparison. That's a good one because I feel like they probably saw how quick some of these kills are. Whereas a lot of Italian horror, they kind of draw it out. Like Fulci, he doesn't waste a cent.
And we
as a prosthetic.
Neither of these guys.
And we should say though that those kills in Friday the 13th are taken from Bava.
Totally, yeah.
Are
Bay of Blood.
taken from Twitch of the Death Nerve and everything.
Yes, yes.
So they could reclaim it if they wanted to.
Yeah.
But I have a feeling though that you're right that American slasher cycle that was starting to come to an end. That seeing that work in America had to be a huge influence.
Totally.
On them. Yeah.
Well, they were also, because they were small crews and small everything, they were their own business people. So they all had to make these business-minded decisions while they're on set, how to be economical, how to stretch the dollar. And it's almost like they're in Italy is a peninsula, but it's like they're almost like on an island where they're just getting radio waves of like, oh, what's happening in the States and what's happening? How do we sell movies like that? How do we make movies like that? But what they were really doing were inspiring all of us the whole time.
Oh, yeah.
Exactly.
And they just thought they were just like copying everyone and doing their own, but they were just like, just crushing it on their own.
Yeah. Right between the eyes.
Right between the eyes. No, this is a good one, man. It's one I'm gonna be watching a lot more, because I probably this is only the third time I've seen it overall.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's easily rewatchable.
Oh my god,
Easily rewatchable.
It should be more on the slasher lists,
Yeah, like horror T-shirt companies should be making Stage Fright shirts,
Sure.
immediately.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're welcome.
Yeah.
I'm glad too. Like it wouldn't have pissed me off. It would have been kind of goofy to have a whole body owl, but I'm glad they went with the like black suit and black leotard.
Oh, me too.
Just the head
No, the whole body owl
would be fucking
would
goofy
be,
as hell.
with
more
like
comical.
flapping wings
Yeah.
flapping
Wouldn't have
around.
made it very
and-
far
that
upstairs or up a ladder. He would have really had a good time in that whole thing.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah.
You already made a good decision.
So I don't know if that was like designed because of that, or if they accidentally, or if they just like day one they took the owl costume off. Or like, no, this isn't gonna work.
What I did notice is that it looks like a connective piece
Right,
that would go
that's what
on
I mean. It
to the
almost
body.
looks like they have a full costume.
it has a very sort of secret society feel to it.
Yeah.
That sort of animal
Yeah.
head thing,
Bohemian
like
Grove.
Bilderberg group.
Little Bohemian Grove
You know
there.
what it really reminded me of? Penguin Cafe Orchestra. Did you ever listen to Penguin Cafe Orchestra?
Wait, what is
I
that?
didn't.
So they made their most famous song is probably their lead singer and writer died of cancer like very soon after they got started and got a following, but their most famous song I think is Perpetuum Mobile, which I think is the Napoleon Dynamite song. It's in Napoleon Dynamite.
Okay.
But they make these really melodic, almost like arpeggiator music, like da 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 da, and you'll hear that for 8 minutes.
Gotcha.
With them doing all these motifs on top of it. That's their kind of style. But they had an obsession with penguins and a penguin head, and like they always had like a penguin head in the background, or a music video where people are wearing penguin heads, or they like digitally like put penguin heads over people in like old timey stuff. But they're obsessed with especially penguins, but animal heads, and that was their motif. That was like their visual aid for their band.
Very cool.
Yeah, it was so cool. They were just like not scary, but it reminded me of it, and it was making me laugh, like thinking about them playing Perpetual Mobile with this owl.
Well, if they got in and like add some weird shit where he like whoos or something like whoo, whoo, whoo.
Yeah, he was just mental, so he was
Chris
faceless.
likes that idea.
I kind of like that idea. Yeah.
But he was scary because he was faceless and you didn't
Yes.
say a
Yeah, he's
word.
silent.
Yes.
Crazy.
Yeah.
You don't know what's going on under there.
You know, I actually have
right.
a friend who is deathly afraid of owls. I think there's actually a phobia out there. But yeah,
Listen.
owls are fucking make you uneasy. I mean, they're creepy, especially because the one they're using is a. I used to know. It's not a barn owl, but it's like it's the same owl they use in fucking Dumb and Dumber, the one that fucking gets a bottle cap to its fucking head.
Boy, this party really died.
It's the same fucking owl. I
Yeah.
can't remember.
All owls are cool.
I love
This
owls.
is a
I
sick
respect
owl.
them.
This owl's.
Yeah.
Yeah,
rules.
because this one's like a snow owl or something.
That's what it
It's
is.
like
Yeah,
white.
that's what it is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's got a different vibe than the traditional
It's
like
a
American
great
owl or something.
image, you know.
It's awesome.
It
It really
really is. Yeah.
Yeah, and just seeing him with that fucking axe, like walking from a distance towards her at the door, and
Yeah.
like, just great, iconic, scary shit.
Yeah.
That's just fucking rules.
It's amazing.
And this killer dies like 3 times, which is pretty fucking
That's
awesome.
what I mean about the ending and being kind of like Halloween. He's kind of almost immortal.
A little bit there at the end.
He gets burnt. He falls, breaks his neck. Doesn't break his neck.
Barrel of fire,
and then fucking
right between
shot
the eyes.
right between the eyes, and still lives.
Still lives.
That's what I mean. Like it's kind of goes into dream logic
Yeah.
at the end, which is fun. You know, it's its own thing.
Yeah.
But yeah,
It works.
I love that they established the mental hospital too. Like where his origin, like, is just enough of an origin.
Well, hold on.
Yeah.
Let's back up for a second. So, the protagonist, the protagonist hurts her ankle. Her friend goes, "We have to go to the hospital," and they go, "Wait, this isn't the way to the hospital. We're going to a psychiatrist's office." Like, well, they're doctors. God, I wish that was like the logic, like for any movie. It's like, oh yeah.
And that's another trope too that it genre bends is usually the lead actor of something is like injured like towards the end of the movie. They like give her limp like at the beginning of the movie.
Yeah.
And so so it's like it's well established that she can't run away.
Smart move on this movie.
And she ends up making it longer than anybody else.
Yeah.
It's the one injured person.
Yeah.
Which is great. It's like you're flipping the script on all this stuff.
There's something cool about that though, like because you're worried about them from the beginning, and then she ends up being the protagonist. You know, so it works out.
Still gives you a final girl, which was a very big thing back then.
Yeah.
So like, even though she was injured and probably should have died first, he makes her like the one who gets out. It's fucking great. It's just a great.
Yeah, I like when movies do that, when like they kind of flip it a little bit. It's like someone who's hobbling the whole time. They're like, oh, like in Bone Tomahawk, they did it with Patrick Wilson's character. It's like he's like hobbling the whole movie. Like, well, he's gonna get it like number 1, right? Yeah. And he lasts the whole movie.
Yeah, Oregon Trail, you would have been dead.
Oh God, yeah, you'd fucking stub your toe. You're like, I got dysentery. Yeah, fuck.
Died. You have died.
Yeah, totally. No, this is a great movie, guys. This I'm glad we got this one. It's definitely up there as far as like my favorite Italian horror movies. The more I think about it, the more we're discussing it, it makes me think that way.
It's a good one. Good director.
Yeah,
Solid
great
director.
first fright.
Great first fright. Right between the eyes.
Right between the eyes.
Just like I said. Right between the eyes.